Ladies and gentlemen, I will be here today interviewing.
Jerry Spiker.
Hello, Jerry. Do you mind answering a few questions today?
I'll be happy to.
Okay. When you hear the Holocaust, what comes to your mind?
World War II, Adolf Hitler. Terrible, terrible thing to happen to 6 million Jews. Just a bad thing.
Thank you. And the question is, how did you feel about the transistor radio being introduced in 1954? And did you have one?
I had one. It was amazing. Everybody thought it was the greatest thing. And then the cell phone came along years later, and that's the greatest thing. Now, the transistor radio was great. It took music to a whole new level, which you're too young to appreciate, the really good music.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Thank you. And the question is, what were your thoughts on the civil rights movement, and have your thoughts changed since then?
The thoughts were, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and so we didn't have the racial conflicts that they had in the South here, like we did in the South. But civil rights is something that is still going on today. It hasn't changed really a whole lot, I'm sorry to say.
Awesome. Thank you. And the question is, in what way was it Lyndon B. Johnson's fault that America entered the war with Vietnam?
No, it wasn't Lyndon B. Johnson's fault. The Vietnam War went on from the French, started 200 years ago. 250 years ago, actually, now. But Lyndon Johnson tried to get us out of Vietnam, actually ended up putting more troops over there. Vietnam was a bad thing, and I don't really want to talk a whole lot about it, to be honest with you.
No problem. And what are your views on CNN and first started and then versus today?
Well, I remember when it first started, it was a lot of what is this all about kind of thing. But I watch CNN every morning now to get the latest global news. And it's interesting, I had the opportunity to go to Europe when Desert Storm started, and the CNN over there was entirely different than the CNN that we have here in the United States. During that conflict, that war, we had news people embedded with our troops, whereas in Europe, the CNN had news people embedded with the Iraqis. And the Iranians, same thing.
And do you believe that the rumors of CNN being fake news is true?
No, it's good news. It's real news. Politics seems to play an awful lot in news today, but CNN is good. I like CNN.
Thank you. And the question is, how did you feel about America's entry into the Gulf War?
I was worried about my son, to be honest with you, at that time. Having gone through Vietnam and experienced that, my greatest concern was for the safety of my son. And I remember when he went over there, I told him, just trust your training. Trust in your training.
Awesome, thank you. How did the attacks on 9/11 change you as a person?
That's a tough question. It made me realize how vulnerable we really are, and how fragile our freedom really is. when it comes down to it. I remember going to work that morning and hearing that a small plane hit one of the towers. And then by the time I got back to the break room and turned it on, it was horrible. But that was a bad thing.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And it is, do you think the increase of troops in Afghanistan was a smart move, and why?
Well, we really, overall, when you stop and think about it, we didn't send that many troops to Afghanistan compared to Vietnam. I think it was a good thing. I think we got out of there in a big hurry. But we were there for 20 years. That's what was amazing. But war. All these questions have to do with war.
Yes, sir. How did the coronavirus pandemic relate to the pandemics in the 1900s?
Well, there was a pandemic 100 years ago called the Spanish flu, which was very similar to what the pandemic was at this time. Having gone through the polio epidemic, and then where we all had to line up and take shots in school, but this pandemic was devastating. I spent 2 years in my house and didn't really go anywhere. I don't know what the end part of the question was.
Oh, and then how did you feel about the mask mandate?
Oh, I think it's a good thing. I wore my mask this morning.
That's good.
We go to the grocery store, we wear our masks. We're elderly, but I think the mask mandate is probably going to come back into effect with this latest thing.
Awesome. Thank you.